Welcome back to Patriot Network TV. This is part 2 of our interview with Captain Larry Bailey, retired from the U.S. Navy. And as I told you in part 1, Captain Bailey was a Navy SEAL, and he gave 27 years of honorable service to our wonderful armed forces. And you know, the old line is that you sleep safe in your bed at night because rough men stand at the ready to do violence in your name to protect you. And for 27 years, that was Captain Bailey's job, to be prepared to do violence in your name to make sure you were safe. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. As a son of Texas, as a boy from Marshall, Texas, when we say Second Amendment, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Being able to go to a closet, pull out a long gun, and go into the woods and do some hunting. And also to defend my home. That, you know, both of those considerations are paramount in the Second Amendment. But you know, the Second Amendment argument that's going on right now, I think, misses the point. You know, they're talking about assault weapons and this and that, and long barrel, short barrel pistols, long clips, and what have you. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not to own firearms, not what kind of firearms. Now, I can understand restricting the ownership of automatic weapons, but anything short of automatic weapons or explosive weapons like 279 grenade launchers and that sort of thing, there's no reason why the Americans are allowed to own those for the reasons that the men at Lexington and Concord in 1775 owned weapons to protect their homes from their arbitrary and capricious machinations of a tyrannical government. And they had the weapons, and they put the British troops back on the road to Boston and protected their rights. And that was the start of our revolution, basically. I'm getting a little bit convoluted here in how I'm trying to explain it, but the substance of it is that the Second Amendment says we can own weapons. It is not you can own a weapon that magazines and clips weren't even in existence in 1781 when the Constitution was written. I'm sorry, 1789. So they weren't anticipating clips or magazines, but they were anticipating that the citizens would have sufficient firepower to defend themselves against the firepower of a tyrannical government. So if a tyrannical government wants to bring in 30-round clips for an M4 weapon, then I should have a 30-round clip. Actually, I don't have a problem with fully automatic and weapons in certain instances. But you know, the National Guard is a militia. A sheriff's posse is a militia. And in my view, if a sheriff decides he wants to form his own county militia, find him any way he wants to, he has that right, because the sheriff is the ultimate arbiter of law enforcement in the counties of this country.
I just got a letter from our local county sheriff, Yavapai County Sheriff, and he informed me in this letter that if the U.S. federal government ever passes a law that says he is to go register guns or take guns away, he will not enforce that. And he and the Arizona Rangers, another voluntary militia that we have in this state, will actively resist any effort to take away the guns from citizens. And I think it's important in this discussion, I think you've hit exactly the right point here. When Jefferson and Madison are penning that amendment to the Constitution, they want the government to fear the citizen, and fear in the original sense of the word, just like in Proverbs, in Proverbs 1:7, it says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And that doesn't mean that you're cowering in the basement and you're scared. It means that you respect the fact that this is who you have to listen to. And the idea that when the government fears the citizen, you have liberty, and when the citizen fears the government, you have tyranny, which was, you know, Madison and Jefferson said that repeatedly. That's why they wrote the Second Amendment. They had in mind the most powerful weapon that an individual could own and responsibly use to keep the government or any other invader off their back. And you're exactly right. This is not an argument around the edges, because what the liberals, what the communists, what the fascists always do is it's incrementalism. Well, we only, you know, we don't want you to have a 30-round clip. We'll go for a 29-round clip today. But that's okay, because they think in terms of 50 years. And if they take a bullet a year out of the clip, pretty soon you have no clip. That's their plan. And it's important to get that about the people you're up against in terms of this debate. It's impossible to have an honest debate with President Obama or Attorney General Holder, because they're dishonest people and they won't tell you the truth. The truth is they don't want anybody armed but the government. And the Second Amendment says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's an endowment we get from God Almighty. It's got nothing to do with the government. The good Lord gave us the right to have weapons and defend ourselves. Nobody, it's an inalienable, non-transferable. You can't give it up, you can't give it away, it can't be taken from you in a legal sense. I think you're making exactly the right argument. And I'd love to hear somebody, National Rifle Association, Gun Owners of America, whoever, I'd like to hear somebody stand up and say, look, all of this talk is ridiculous. The reason you got nuts going into theaters and schools is because the ACLU shut down all the nut houses. We used to, guys like this guy in Connecticut used to be under involuntary sequestration. We used to put them in the nut house because they were nuts. And people won't like me using that word, but when I was an undergraduate in college, we had to go down and do 3 months at the state home for the mentally retarded. This is how long ago it was. We called people mentally retarded. The state home for the insane and the state prison. And you had to do that. That was the beginning of service learning, but you had to do that so you understood why those institutions existed. And I can tell you from going to Boulder, Montana, and Warm Springs, Montana, and Deer Lodge, Montana, those institutions were awful things to be incarcerated in, but thank God we had them. And if anybody wanted to talk about, gee, we're going to put crazy people in jail for being crazy, I'd be all in favor of it. But to come to me as an honest taxpaying gun owner and tell me I've got to give up my rights that endowed me from God because some nut shot somebody, I ain't going for that. That's not happening.
No, you know what? I saw a video last night that it wasn't just some homemade video. It was a very well done one. I can't remember who the narrator was, but it showed that every single one of the mass murderers in the last few years was on some sort of antidepressant. And they were diagnosed as either manic depressive or ADHD. They were on Prozac, they were on Zoloft, on all of these mood-altering drugs. Every single one of them. And also, they were all liberal Democrats.
Well, you know, Gabby Giffords, who got shot down in Tucson, and you know, it was a big tragedy. It was a horrible, horrible tragedy. The man who shot her, this Loeffner guy, is just plain nuts, and everybody knew he was nuts. Everybody who dealt with him was scared of him, and nobody, you know, talk about the people in the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate passing the buck and not doing the right thing, kicking the economic and military problems down the road for somebody else to deal with. At the local level, they're doing the same thing. Every single person who dealt with this Loeffner guy knew he was nuts, knew he was dangerous, and knew he was going to hurt somebody, but they were so afraid of the ACLU suing him for saying, hey, this guy's nuts, he's got to be locked up, they wouldn't say anything. None of these guys, you know, the Columbine shooting, the local sheriff knew those kids were troublemakers, and he didn't have the authority to lock them up. We need to reestablish the idea of public safety. That's what we need to do. And people like you, Captain Bailey, who went into the Navy, became a SEAL, fought for our freedom for the better part of 27 years, for almost 3 decades worth of fighting, it's an insult to your service that the people in the Congress won't stand up and do the right thing. Captain Bailey, we're almost out of time here. Say goodbye to the folks and thank you for being on.
Okay, I am glad to be here. Hey, by the way, just one quick one. You mentioned Gabby Giffords. Did you know that the U.S. Navy is going to name a ship after her?
Oh, well, I don't think that's the right thing. I just had
to put that in. It's been a joy talking to y'all. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your service, Captain Bailey. We'll see you next time. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.